Alright, hello, and another video ready for recording. And right now I just wanted to mention my favorite line, and actually it's I like playing d4 and against knight f6 especially, but I do think that certain I think d5 is d5, and if c takes d5, knight takes d5, this move order is kind of annoying to play as white, because if you don't play e4 here, then you can play e3, but it's really slow. And I think the lines with e4 are quite okay for black. I actually started playing it myself as black, and well, why not bishop b4? And well, in general I think it's just because I like bishops. I did play this myself as black, and actually one of my games last year went like this. I think I castled and queen c2, and I played b6. No, not b6. Let's see. Yeah, because b6 there is some... yeah, c5, of course. You need to pressure the center, otherwise e4 may be possible. And like this. And my opponent played bishop d2 and e3. And after bishop e2, bishop b7. Now I believe he played a3, or was it castle? Yeah, it was a3. And I just took this and went knight c2 e4. And now I think bishop d4 and it's kind of interesting, with a attempt to play the b pawn and move the bishop back. And actually, if I think castling here, then black can play the knight to e4, because if this is taken, then bishop e4 gains a tempo on the bishop, no, on the queen, and it should be kind of decent for black. So that's why a3 is played here. And after the game I actually found this game by Nigel Short as white, and it went exactly like this. And here my opponent did the same, played bishop b4, and now rook e8 and a4. Yeah, and now I think I played rook c8, castles, d5, and my opponent played b3. And here I made a mistake by playing bishop a6. I think I should have taken this pawn immediately and tried to... even a5 is actually quite a decent idea. But I played bishop a6 because I wanted to create some weaknesses, and my opponent played rook d1, and I answered with queen c7. And now my opponent played rook ac1, and in this position I actually played the cool move knight takes f2 and my opponent was rather shocked at this moment and actually played rook f1, and this was clearly a mistake, and I think white should still take this and just play this position. The point behind the reason why I played queen c7 here and not knight takes f2 was because if I play knight takes f2 here, white actually gains a tempo because the rook can capture on d1 in one move. So I wanted to tempt white into playing rook c1, and that actually happened. And materially, black gets two pawns and a rook for 2 pieces, but it's the strong dark squared bishop. So yeah, and I believe it should be kind of okay, but it's very unbalanced, and I really like the prospects of having the pawns, at least from the perspective of the game. I think if I don't play something like a sacrifice, then I'll just be worse off playing against the bishops. So that was the idea behind this sacrifice, and as mentioned, my opponent didn't even take it, which was a shock to me, and in this position I just returned, and that's actually my only experience with the Nymphs of Indian in over the board play. I did play it a bit online in Blitz, and I believe yeah, I think I played b6 here sometimes, and yeah, queen b3 is kind of interesting, which tries to exploit what black's move order is, and even in the regular variation, queen b3 is kind of annoying because black is questioned without having to without white having to play a3, and I think simple development like b6, queen c2, and something like bishop b7, and quite a few times I've met a3, and just I think d6 is kind of standard, and I played bishop. I've met bishop g5, but also e3, and yeah, this construction with knight f3 is very interesting against some knight d7, rook c8 setups. For instance, let's say e3 here, and then knight d7 and just bishop e2, and for instance, let's say castles, and now black can play something like rook c8, but I think maybe rook d1. And the problem with these kinds of positions is that white just ignores everything and plays really slow, and I think it's sometimes quite hard to make something happen as black. Maybe cd4, rook d4, and by slow playing maybe something like b5. But the knight is hanging, what am I thinking about? Yeah, but this kind of slow play is actually quite interesting for white, and this is why I think something like this is actually very challenging, and probably black should go back to d5 variations. And then it's a question whether you want your bishop on b4. It's definitely putting more pressure, but at the same time, if white just, let's say, plays maybe queen a4 is probably a move, and something like maybe e3, and yeah, I guess this is not very dangerous for black, but at the same time black does have his knight on c6, and that's, I know Shakhriyar Mamdiaro likes to play this e3 variation. For instance, if I think bishop g5 is a move, and then just h6, and these lines can really just be completely let's say equal, or something like yeah, maybe white actually wants to take, but in these positions I find that black often gets decent compensation, let's say, for the bishop, and moves like g5 are quite annoying sometimes, and I don't really play this as black, and I like just keeping the bishop at home and playing d5 straight, and that's more because I think it's more your approach to chess that I don't like giving up the bishop, and these slow setups are quite annoying. So I would rather go into something more standard, perhaps, with d5. Yeah, but I do play this as white myself, and it's quite, well, maybe you can question my decision, but when I play white myself, I don't play queen c2, and maybe I should, but I play f3, and this is probably the sharpest variation against Nimzo Indian. And the idea is just to get in e4. Now, I think the most challenging move is actually castles here, but c5 is also very respectable. Now you can't play a3 here and just go into the classical, but black doesn't have to castle immediately, and that's usually, actually, this is why castles, white normally plays a3, and I'll show after why. But yeah, f3 and c5, d5, and now b5, then e4 and castles. I believe white should opt for e4, e5 at this point, and I think black should hold. And something really tricky is if they play knight e8, but I think that taking this piece is the best try for white, and now playing this b4 move. And I think it's very complicated, and you can actually find something for white in these crazy lines. And if black plays more solid with something like d6, I think just e4. And let's say castles. And well, actually I want to mention one other thing, and that's after b5 and e4 I once met bishop b7, or was it after d6? Yeah, like maybe it was after d6. But I think bishop b7 was quite a surprise when I played this in a blitz chess, and I remember I analyzed this and figured out a way to deal with it, but I actually played a national master who played this, and I had never seen it. But I think it's actually very respectable, and the idea is just to break down the center, not releasing any tension. Yeah, but if black plays lower with d6, and because against b5 you can also play knight h3, but I think this is not so good, because here knight f4, there is actually e d5, I think, and was it like this? Maybe it wasn't like this, it was probably this one, and then takes. Yeah, and I think black gets a good position after after a series of moves, like yeah, and that's why I think e4 should be played against b5. But d6 is also very respectable, of course, and something like knight g2. Now probably a6 is a move, but bishop a5 is kind of interesting as well. And I think b5 white should play let's see, d takes e, f takes, and then bishop f4. I believe that is the variation I like. There is d5 there, but I'm not sure about it. Yeah, and it's probably the other way is just playing a6. And now bishop e3, or wait, let's see. Yeah, knight g3 is probably decent, but yeah, let's play that for the moment. And now maybe bishop a5. And maybe now taking and bishop f4 is something, so I guess maybe if, for instance, let's say if black takes this and then tries to prepare b5, yeah, like this, I think white should just ignore this, and b5 there is maybe a4, well, let's say, and now I think bishop a5 is a move, and this this one there is no capture, so I think that's kind of okay for black. But even so, I think if black prepares with something like knight with d7, then white just continues with simple development, and let's say black keeps preparing, and I found that knight g3, and now probably black is ready to play b5, and I think white should just keep ignoring, and knight f5 is sometimes on the cards. But even so, I think this variation is very similar to the Benoni, but the bishop is now on a5, and this can actually be sometimes a relief for white, because there's not so much pressure on the queen side. So a move like b3 is possible, and it's a bit hard to advance these pawns, and this also goes if you get into this position from the Ruy Lopez. You can actually get there by in the Swidler line, for example, with ed4, cd4, and then c5, and then d5. Then we get almost the same position. Now maybe something like 95 can be played, and I think just castles. And this general setup for white is something that I really like. And for instance, let's say that black goes c4. Now I think that a good move is rook fc1. And the plan here is to prepare rook b1 and b3. And the bishop is perfectly placed on e3, because playing bishop b6, we have already covered this bishop. So let's just say rook b8 for the moment, and I think something like rook b1. And if black plays b4, he really has to be careful, because after knight d1 the c pawn is very vulnerable, and it may even just drop. And if not, then it's a bit hard to play as black, actually, because you're lacking a plan. I think as soon as black tries this one, then actually knight d1 is kind of interesting. And the idea is just to cover this piece, and now we're ready for b3. And if we can undermine these pawns, then I think the a pawn will be a bit vulnerable. And well, black can probably return with bishop a5, but probably just queen c2 is good enough. Now let's just see what happens if this is taken. Now probably knight takes is kind of good, but I wouldn't mind queen takes. I guess knight takes is more challenging because queen b6 would trade queens. And well, I don't really see what black is doing. I guess you can try still something like queen b6, but even king h1 is not a huge deal. Like the c pawn is always under attack, so b4 is not ready. Black is not ready for b4. Let's say now you can try b3 as white, and this usually means that black has to give up this pawn formation, and I actually like this for white because we can follow up with something like b4 and fixing the pawn on the a file, and in the meantime we have knight f5 and queen g5 as possible ideas. Not to mention that h3 and f4 sometimes is possible. But really white just wants to keep these pawns and play on the queen side. And I actually like white's ideas here. Let's say something like bishop d7. And probably just b4 is good here. But I think we should get out of the pin by now. So probably king h1. And now I assume rook c8 should be played. But anytime white can just put the knight to f5 and yeah, you'll have to watch out. Like black will have to protect this somehow, and if you're not careful then you may get in trouble. Like maybe this knight is more accurate actually, because then you can play the queen to g5. For instance, king f8. Now is knight g7 on? I guess there is knight g6. Well, knight f5. Yeah, this is kind of interesting. Draw agreed or what? Yeah. I guess here queen e3 or something is probably good, like queen e3. Yeah, that looks problematic for white. But there's always these chances with knight f5. And I generally like this as white. And why is this useful? Well, if you like this variation, then it goes without saying that if black plays g6, then you can actually play f3. And I actually do this most of the time. Now d5 is the grünfeld try, but often this is somewhat of an anti-King's Indian and anti-grünfeld move. And often you will actually meet c5 and e6. and this move order may be quite good against this, because after this one, and if maybe e5 is something, yeah, that may be something. Well, just say that for instance d6, and if this capture happens, now generally I want to capture with the c-pawn, but the e-pawn is not bad, and actually I think white can hope for some advantage here, and the plan is just to stop b5, and in the meantime maneuver the pieces on the king side and not trade pieces. Try to use the space advantage and then take it from there. And the reason why I don't play c takes d usually is that in this regular variation with knight g3, then knight e8 comes here, and it's quite annoying against this specific move order, because black is actually a tempo quicker than I want, like probably bishop e3 and queen h4, queen d2 probably, but just a6. Yeah, let's see this, like queen d2 is very interesting as well here, like just allowing b5. But now f5 is easier for black to achieve, because this g6 setup is what do they say, like flows better with the b5, because now the pressure combines on the queen side, whereas before this bishop was more annoying towards the center. So generally a4 should be played, and I think that's something like knight e7, bishop e2, knight c7, castles, and something like rook b8, and very soon black is ready for b5, and you can always play a5, but black just goes b5 anyways, and in a variation like this it's quite hard to play as white actually. Maybe takes and rook a7 or rook a2, but you know, these variations are very tricky because black gets a lot of what he wants, and that's why I generally take with the e-pawn here. And well, g6 is kind of annoying for me, and if they played the regular benoni, then I would also play this variation, but without f3. So I would play e4, g6, and now knight e2. And the difference in this variation is that in the normal variation, white can just play without f3 in general. And this usually saves the tempo. So for instance, like knight c7, maybe queen d2. Now black can always give up the bishop and get b5, but that shouldn't scare you too much. So let's say for instance bishop d7 is possible, but let's just say a6. And now whenever we get into these positions, like bishop d7 is very awkward for knight on b8, so I think knight d7 should probably be played. And If we look at this, now I saved the tempo with f3. And in some of these positions it's very useful, like now knight e5, then I will play f3, and the knight is now already on e5, whereas before it would be on d7, so now black has wasted an extra move, and it's also less supportive of the center. And if not, then I don't have a need to cover the g4 square. I may not even need it in that position, but 95 is not really scary. But the rook b8 is a bit interesting. But now you see I've saved the tempo, so now white can use it. Actually, something like rook b1 is very interesting, and the idea is just to meet b5 with b3, and yeah, it's quite a move, but it's actually very effective. And now, if this is closed, then I think knight d1, knight b2, knight c4 comes very quickly. Maybe bishop b7 though is a bit annoying, because now f5 is probably on. I guess we have knight h5, so maybe I should not even worry about it. Like knight b2, and if f5, maybe even knight c4. Yeah, maybe. Well, in there it's also possible to play something like bishop c4 in case. But I really want to cover this pawn, so maybe bishop h6 is a move. Looks possible. And yeah, well, now the knight comes to e3, which is a really good square. And let's say something like queen h4, for instance, and just play something like this. And I think I wouldn't really mind playing white here, because now the pawns are committed. But if I did not have this extra tempo, then probably, let's say you play b3 here and b5. Well, if it was black to move, then b4 would pick up an exchange. Well, that may be actually a decent try, but you know, in general, playing a5 and stopping this b5 is not really possible, because black gets to play it anyways. So rook b1 is actually quite a key move. And in general, I like keeping the tension here. Yeah, and if black does not play knight e8, then white will continue with castles. If something like rook e8, then just castles. And often, if black plays something like knight bd7, often, if h5, we often have bishop g5. But even in these positions, like bishop g5, and if h6 is not played here, then white can try the very cool f4. Like if queen c7, for instance, then I think f4 is very interesting, with the idea just to put this bishop on h4 and actually try to stir up a quick attack with e5 and f5. I won quite a few games there. But even in this variation, I think bishop b3 is kind of a good move. Just intending queen d2, and anytime you look at this variation, like a6 and maybe a4. Now let's just say knight e5 happens, and I will probably play f3 right now, because knight e5 is moving away from preparing b5, and that is really black's main idea. And let's say bishop d7, I often go something like h3, threatening f4, and then the knights are running out of squares. And even here I think queen d2 is a safe move, and if b5 is played often, white can just ignore it, because now there are so many pieces on the long diagonal. But even taking this, I don't see what the point was. Maybe there was something, but I don't think so. Maybe rook b8, and yeah, and now, so if you want to play this really slow, then I think rook b1, b5, and then just playing something like b3. It's very interesting. Maybe actually this rook is better, and then playing like this. And the cool thing is to play something like maybe c4 is a move here. Yeah, but let's say b4, and now I like placing my knight to d1. Actually, one of the main variations, they go with let's say a6 here, a4, and b6, which is a slow move trying to stop a5. Then this variation with bishop e3, and if something like knight d7, queen d2, let's say bishop b7, and now I like to move rook c1 and rook fc1, and the plan is simply that h5, f3. Actually, yeah, now the e-pawn needs support. h5, knight h1, and something like knight h5 is probably called for here, when I would probably play knight f2, and f5. I think we can just take this because we got a knight f2. Oh, actually bishop g5 wins the pawn. Yeah, and if not knight h, yeah, this h5 is a bit questionable actually. Maybe you should keep the pawn back, playing something like knight h7 first, and then I would like to play rook ab1. Oh wait, I made a mistake now. Yeah, probably, actually I would probably play knight d1 here to cover the bishop, so that f5 we can just take it, and then any rook takes e3 is not on, and b5 here I think we can just take that. Let's say rook b8 for instance, and I like playing this variation, and the idea is actually if something like queen h4, then well, that was tricky. Now bishop e5 is on. I guess bishop f2. Yeah, I can play knight f1 here, and some of these positions, like maybe I don't even need to bother. Like b4 is probably the best here, and b4 is the general idea when black has a problem reacting because the normal b5 is not on, and it's more of a weakness, these pawns. So I think the slow b6 is actually somewhat of a mistake, and that's why we keep the pawn behind on the f2 square. So in other words, the benoni, if you want the benoni against me, probably you should start with g6 and well, then you'll suffer in the other variation instead, like with something like this. Then I will just take with the e-pawn, and I trust that this position is actually a bit better for white with best play. Yeah, and that's some ideas in the f3 variations. And finally I want to cover the Nimzo Indian with f3 and actually entering something not related to c5. There are a few moves here. I think knight h5, castles, d5, and even something like b6 is possible. Now bishop takes c3 is a bit questionable, because then white gets everything he wants. d6 is a playable variation, but I quite like white. I think castles is kind of good. And now e4, there is d5, and I think e5 is the best move, because if you play this variation, then you allow some knight h5. The point is that if I play e5 directly, and knight h5 now is met with knight h3, and now there is no bishop takes h3 because I didn't exchange the pawns, and now the knight is trapped. So probably g6 must be played soon, because if you play something like this, then just this is close to game over. Let's say dc4 for instance, and now I would play g4, and this check does nothing because king e2 is incredibly strong. And now the threat of bishop g5 is actually trapping the queen as well as the hanging knight. And I actually had a game going exactly like this with king e2, and well, I think it's quite satisfying when you win games like this. Maybe f5, but still bishop g5. I don't even remember how he got out of this. I think he just went down a piece and something. Yeah, so d5, e5, and now knight d7. And now the exchange, and f4 is not that great after is it f6 or c5? It's always so hard to remember. Yeah, I think it's c5. And here I think bishop e3 is probably the best try. The idea is that if you take this pawn and play knight c6, then I will just keep my bishop there, and actually taking this, it would give black the isolated pawn, and maybe knight b6. But in this position, white actually has something to play for, like maybe castle queenside is the move. So I think that knight c6, knight f3, and probably black should just ignore this. Maybe I think something like knight f3, yeah, like let's say a3 here, then the bishop goes back, bishop e3, and in this variation now bishop takes c3 is actually a good move, because this bishop takes c3, I think knight c5 is a good move, and white has many concrete problems with knight e4 and d4 possibly, and bishop g4 is very annoying as well. So I think white should take with the pawn, and actually I think white is kind of just equal with best play, but this is not so easy to play as white, and probably the better move is a3. And now this variation is quite famous for the candidates match between Shahryar Mamdiyarov and Levon Aronian with queen e8 here. And actually I think just a normal recapture with the queen is sufficient, because if white plays bishop d3, which I think is kind of a small mistake, then black just follows up with bishop f5, trading the bishops, and then black didn't even sacrifice the pawn. So I think these positions are very hard to play as white, and maybe something like knight e2 or knight h3, and yeah, these positions are not very much to my taste, and that's why I did play e4 myself and actually got a really nice position after let's see, yeah, in this position one of my other opponents played now what did he play? Yeah, knight b6, and I played a3, just grabbing the bishop, and then my opponent set up this blockade with c6, and I played bishop d3 here, which is a good move. I think bishop f5 is the last try for equality for black, but even then I think just bishop d3 actually, because if you trade here then it's hard to stop f5, and if you play f5 yourself then you're really taking away the prospects for black. Black does have the c4 square, but knight f3 and something like g4 is actually close to being good. Now the game I played actually went like this. Now my opponent play f5. I play knight f3, and yeah, my opponent just blocked everything. I castled. Knight d7. Let's see. Yeah. And I believe I played h3 here. And that's quite a tricky move. My opponent played rook e8, I believe. And in this position I played g4. And yeah, I think it's just a very good move. Well, wait, let's see. The move order was actually rook e8, and in this position I played the sneaky h3. And this is directed exactly against knight e7. I think actually knight a6 is better, but against knight a6 there is rook a2, and if you move the knight then g4 comes anyways, And like this one, if you take this, then there's rook g2, or let's see, maybe f5. Actually, it's very many moves that can be played for white there, and this is extremely strong. So my opponent didn't really sense the danger and played knight e7 and knight f8, and now I played the simplistic takes and takes, and after queen c2 my opponent actually had problems defending this pawn, because it's really hard. You have, the only move is queen d7, but then knight h4 actually picks up the pawn. Here just king h2, and yeah, so that was a really quick gain of material. My opponent just played what did he play? Knights. Let's see. I think he played queen e7, and then he just traded. Yeah. And this went. I won this very quickly. Something like knight g6, I believe, queen g4. Queen g7 maybe? Yeah, I think I just played like this. And I think my opponent went here, and did I play? Yeah, I played king f2, I think. And well, this is really dreadful for black. Yeah, so you should not try to just close things up. It can backfire. Yeah, and I think c5 is actually the only move that, the reason why f4 is not good. And this is why I would play a3 here today. And now something like knight h5 is kind of interesting, because f5 is a normal idea. And I want to mention that d5 is, well, somewhat of a classical line with e takes d, and in the, yeah, well, like in the world championship match between Carlsen and Anand, Carlsen and they ended up in this position via transposition, and I believe black is close to lost in this position actually, because g4 is just close to winning. Well, that's my opinion. You can try to sacrifice a piece, but it shouldn't be enough. Yeah, c4 should not be played. Maybe if you want to win, but you are also in real danger of losing. And what I meet much more is something like b6. And actually I think this position is quite good for white. I like to play rook a2 here. And the idea is that bishop a6, I play bishop b1. And after knight c6, I bring the rook over to f2. It would be ideal to go g4 and play rook g2, but after rook e8 we have concrete problems with the e file. So knight e2, and if and I think that something like this is probably how black will continue. And the point behind this rook maneuver to f2 is that now the rook made it from a1, and now it's much easier to include it. So after something like g4 we can have rook g2, or if we play e4 straight, it's actually an attack on f7. So it's really deep rook move, but well, sometimes you have to do funky stuff. Yeah, you can also play just regularly with knight e2, and that should also be quite interesting for white. And the last variation is if d5 a3, you can also play bishop b7 or bishop d6. I think bishop d6 actually is close to loses a pawn. If you play the idea with c5, because there is let's see, there is one move order here which is really tricky for black to meet. I think it's b4, bishop e7, and takes, probably castles, and yeah, I think just taking this pawn, and it should be tricky for black to hold the balance. And after e takes, then I think e5 is a good move. So I think bishop e7 is more reliable, and still e4, and c5 in this variation is actually more tricky. And I actually faced this a few times, and I think bishop e2 should be played. But this is not so easy, and even objectively, black may be just fine here. I do think white can get a small edge with the best play. Something like knight f3 and queen c2, I think I analyzed. The other move is e5, but after d5 I actually think that white is slightly better in all variations. Castles, knight f3, and let's say a5. And I think queen c2 and bishop e2 are kind of good moves. Maybe queen c2, because I know that me myself, to begin with, I would play bishop d3 often, but then you have a small problem with taking this pawn, because black can counter with knight e4, like right here, and f5, and actually it may not even be clear in this position, but that's the idea. And even the bishop is not so well placed on d3. Queen c2 is very flexible, like if black goes bishop c5, knight f3, castles, and now I think queen c2 is actually the cleanest way to play. Or bishop e2, but it's either of those. And the final variation you will probably meet as white is f3, d5, and if black takes and goes c5, and I think white should take immediately. You can also try something like e3, but in the end I think you will not get anything there. And e takes d transposes to the line with e3 next, so knight takes. And now in this variation Here there are 3 moves: knight f3, knight e7 and knight c7. Probably knight c7 is a bit worse, but knight f6, bishop e3 and castles. And I think actually I like a4 here, and this pawn is not really a problem because it's not really that important, and you just gain a lot of time. Say something like knight e7 and then queen b3 and knight c5, there is queen b4. So black should probably try something like knight c6 for instance. And now the pawn is actually hanging, so queen a3. And I like this placement of the queen because it's just covering enough for white to start to get these other pieces into play. And in general I think black will probably be able to reach equality with the moves. Yeah, you can go queen c7 here as well. When queen a3, black should probably play b6 and sacrifice a pawn. Yeah, and this is probably the equalizer, but it's not completely equal. White can still try. For instance, with knight h3 here, and if we get a symmetrical position, white is just a bit earlier with development, but I'm not really, I don't think this is anything special. It's just a small edge with the rook may get to b1 a bit sooner and things like this. I wouldn't really want to give up my bishop, but taking this pawn is, I think black equalizes here. Yeah, so this line is quite reliable with c5. And there is also c6, and this move is very tricky because c takes is met with c takes. And now I have actually suffered really badly as white in this position. And I think white should just go e4 here. The point is that e5 there is knight f3. And if this one is taken, then queen g4 wins the g-pawn. And this should be kind of interesting for white. Yeah, so yeah, the last line to cover is what if black goes knight h5 here. I think probably knight h3. In general, you don't want to play g3 as white because it's quite slow. And there the sacrifice it's actually a pawn sacrifice. Is interesting. Or is it after rook a2? Yeah, probably. And these positions are generally quite tricky to play as white. I think this is also another reliable way to play. But white does have some chances. Yeah, and that's what I like to do. I actually have quite a huge score with the f3 nim, so, and I actually played exclusively, so I should know it pretty well. And there is also yeah, there are some independent tries with for instance yeah, c5, d5 and knight h5 in this position, and I think knight h3 is a good move, and this check and taking this pawn is really dangerous, and I think something like g4, yeah, I think it's g4 and g5. Yeah, this is crazy, I must admit. e4 and but there's knight c3, maybe just recapture, but then check, so I guess not. Yeah, very interesting. Huh. Yeah, maybe it's e4. Probably it is, but is it queen d4? Interesting. I think e4 should be kind of a good move as well, but it's a bit hard to remember right now. But I think knight h3 is the critical move. g3 is a bit slow and gives black chances to castle and play f5. Alright, that's it for now, and I have to sleep now. See you. Bye.